Hi, it's Steve Hargadon. I'm the founder of the Tiny House Summit, and it's really fun to have Rubi Beg here. Ruby's going to talk about the tiny house that she built as her senior project in college, but I'm going to let her tell that story. Ruby, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, really appreciate your doing this. I'm just going to let you go ahead and get started, and then I'll try and collect some questions for the end.
All right. So yeah, my name is Rubi Beg, and I built a tiny house on wheels that I now live in full time. And I built it in the end of my senior year of college as my senior project. And really my senior project was more about like a paper about tiny houses, so I didn't really have to build my house, but I was really set on doing it for myself. So I built it and now I live in it, and it feels like a dream come true, and I'm just trying to navigate tiny house living because it's very different than people think. I think it's like this dream that a lot of people dream about and fantasize about, but it has a lot of like quirks, and the journey is a huge learning process. And so I'm just sharing my journey with all of you so that you can kind of get a sense of the difficulties that you'll run into building a tiny house, and just how to overcome those things. So I'll get right into it. I'm going to get over to the slideshow. All right. So this is my tiny house on wheels, and I've got a little porch that I built in the front. This is it after it's kind of been set up. I've got my solar panels. It's an 8 by 18 house, so it's 144 square feet. I've got a loft, a sleeping loft on one side where the wall is kind of taller right there. It's about 10 feet tall there, and the other part is about 8 feet tall. And then I have a storage loft on the other side, which is really, really important and very useful. So I highly recommend that for anyone who's building a tiny house. You always need more storage than you think. So I've got my whole house set up here. It's in Swannanoa, North Carolina. It's a beautiful little spot and kind of landscape around it. And to me, tiny houses are really this cross between temporary living and permanent living. So you don't have to be in an RV and, freezing in the wintertime. But you can also still travel around with it. But you don't want to, I've seen some people who take their tiny houses and go on road trips and everything. But for me, it's more about just being able to move it from place to place for like a year or 2 years at a time. So I've been parked in this spot for about a year and a half. And it's a beautiful spot and I love it. Got all set up with a porch and everything, which the porch is really important for me to be able to hang out outside and sit out there in the rain and everything. So yeah, this is my adventure building my tiny house. This is me when I first picked up my trailer. I had no idea what I was getting into. So it's an 8 by 18 trailer, like I said before, and there's no wheel well built onto the trailer, so I had to build that myself. We towed it home. I got it from Reese Trailers in Arden, if any of you are trying to look for a trailer. They will custom make a trailer for you, and I drew this out, the trailer out, and I had the dimensions exactly what I wanted, and they built it for me. So the first thing that we did, I built this house with my partner, so the whole time we were working on this together. So the first thing that we did was get up underneath the trailer and put these stabilizer jacks on here. And those are just on all four corners. And when we park the house, it's really easy to just raise the house in each corner and then crank these jacks down. So we don't have to have 4 separate jacks that we're lugging, in addition to the house. They're just right on there. So we had to drill up through the steel, and if you're ever drilling through your trailer, which I'm sure you would do at some point when building a tiny house, be very careful of the steel flecks getting in your eyes and on your face or in your mouth or anything, because my partner got this steel in his eye on the second day we were building, so that was our first issue that we had, but he got it out, and the eye doctor did good, so his eyes are still there. So there's me and my goggles, very important. So the second thing we did was put furring strips on the floor. I decided to build my floor inside the trailer rather than on top of it because the space that you save really counts. So we insulated inside the trailer, and because the floor was going to go right on top of there, we needed to level it all out. And it was nicer to have wood there instead of steel also because it doesn't conduct as much of the temperature. So like if it's cold outside, it just helps a lot for the insulating value. So now we needed to close off the bottom of the trailer, and we knew it was going to be really hard to screw flashing up onto the bottom and go from the bottom up, because when we were doing that with the jacks, my partner got steel in his eye, and we were really worried about that happening again. So his grandfather brought his backhoe along and just flipped the trailer upside down with it, which most people don't have access to those kinds of machines and those resources, but we were really lucky, and it made the process so much easier. So we did our layer of flashing, and underneath that we did a layer of masonite to make it a little more rigid, and some tar paper to make sure no water would leak in there. And then we flipped it back over, so there you can see the masonite in the bottom. And so this really created these perfect little pockets to insulate in. And you can see on the sides here, I couldn't get the flashing and the masonite in there like I could in the middle. On the edges, it's still open, so I had to insulate that in a separate way, and it was a little bit difficult. So if you are getting a trailer built custom, just account for that. Just think about those things, because those are some things that I didn't think about at the time, and it made it harder for me. So there's me sitting on the trailer right after we put it back under cover to make sure no water would rain on it at night and everything. And so then we started insulating, and I wanted to use non-toxic insulation. So we went to Lowe's and we got green fiber insulation, which is essentially like recycled newspaper and maybe a little bit recycled fiber from clothing, but mostly newspaper. And they treat it with a certain kind of salt that makes it fire retardant, but there's no formaldehyde, no super toxic chemicals. So we still had to wear dust masks and gloves and everything and just be cautious not to breathe it in. But it's just much better. You don't have to suit up like you do with fiberglass and everything. And then you can rent these blower machines for free from the store. So we would just cover each cavity with the flooring and then blow it in with this big blower machine, and it would just perfectly fill up the cavities nice and level. As you can see, it's nice and fluffy stuff. And so then we started to put the flooring on, and we glued and screwed it down. And there is us putting the flooring on. We used Advantech flooring, and it seems to be working well for us. So once the floor was done, the next thing that I did was draw my framing plans. And actually the first thing that I did in the very beginning, before I even bought my trailer, was find my windows and doors. And I got them all recycled or repurposed windows, you know, used windows or showroom windows. I got some showroom windows from people from Craigslist. And I found my doors at the Habitat for Humanity Restore. So because I had all those windows and doors ready, then I knew exactly what dimensions I needed to draw my plans to. So this is the east and west side. This is the north side. And I have these directions, like I can park in my house any way I want to, but I have these directions because on the south side right here, I wanted to have these two big glass doors on this side and a larger double pane window there, so that the sun can come in from the southern side. and it would just fill the house with light, and it makes it so much warmer in the winter time. I feel the sun come in all the time in the winter, and it keeps the house significantly warmer. So I drew all these framing plans, and once I had this all set and I knew that it was structurally sound, as you can see, I have headers over the windows and the doors. Headers just basically transfer the weight so that there's no weight on the window, so the glass won't break, and when you're going down the road, it's really secure. And I have headers over where the wheels are going to be, over the wheel wells, because I had to build my own wheel wells. So here is the a couple of the walls. You can see on the left side where my double doors go. I've got a lot of windows and very little wall space to hang things. It's kind of what ended up happening, but the light in my house is great. And here we started doing some sheathing. This is my partner's grandfather. We call him Papa. And he started to help me build the walls at this point because my partner had to go off to school and start up for the next semester. And once we built all the walls, as you can see in this previous picture, we have them stacked. We have the walls just stacked on top of each other here. So in one day, we pulled the trailer out, and all these people from the community came, and we raised the walls in one day and sheathed the whole structure to make sure that the rain wouldn't get in on the floor and get into that green fiber insulation. So this is all the same day, putting on the roof rafters. We had those built ahead of time, getting ready for this day. And we're really lucky. It looked like it was going to rain. It was threatening really hard, but it didn't rain on us, which was ideal. So we're still sheathing. It's starting to get a little bit later in the day here. And this is the end of the day. And we just put some plastic over where the doors go. And it drizzled a little bit at night, and the house was fine. And what we used for sheathing is this zip board. And the zip board is really handy because usually old-fashioned sheathing is usually just like exterior plywood, and then you put Tyvek over it or house wrap, which is a barrier that doesn't let, it lets water vapor and air kind of filter through the stuff, but it doesn't let water just like flow through and hit your sheathing. But the zip board already has that coating on it. It has this green paint that kind of lets it breathe, but it doesn't let the water just infiltrate into it. So it's really handy stuff. And then they have this zip tape, which is really, really strong tape. You have to be very careful not to like stick it on your skin. But that you just use to seal up all of the seams. And it's very quick and easy, much better than using house wrap. So the next thing we did was put the roof on. And I just had a roofing order. We measured the roof and got a custom roofing order, and it was pretty cheap because it's such a tiny house. And we put some flashing, as you can see, right in that little triangle portion, so that you know, the rain, if the rain hits that, it'll just flow down and hit the roof. So we won't have any leakage right there. And then I started building the wheel wells. So this is how I framed them out. And it worked out pretty good. And then on the other side, I did flashing, and I taped it really well with that zip tape. And I've never had any issues with it. It's never leaked or anything. It's worked pretty good. And there we go. Then we started to do the doors and the windows, and we taped them in and everything. And it started to really come together and look like a house, which is really exciting. The doors were really hard to get in, but we finally got them in. They're very heavy. And then we started to kind of clothe the house in this siding, and that was when it really was coming together. And it was this part is one of the most exciting parts, putting the siding on, and all the trim and everything. And I was really fortunate. My partner's grandfather had a job to cut down a couple of pine trees. I think it was like 8 pine trees or so, and he took 2 of them to his friend, and they milled them down together into siding for my house. So all of my exterior siding was donated by them, which saved me a lot of money, and I was just so grateful for them. So I still thank them so much for that. So here you can see it's coming together. And I did live edge siding. They just basically milled it down and had one smooth edge, and the rest of it was just bark. So it gave it this really whimsical look. So then I realized I really needed a place to house my propane tanks and my battery bank, because I knew that I wanted to do solar power. So I started to build this box on the outside of the house on the very front of the trailer. And oh, this is on Halloween actually. There was a snowstorm, and we were doing the wiring in the house. And an electrician came and helped us just string all of the wires into the outlets in preparation for putting all the solar stuff in that box that I was building. And then he taught me how to wire in the outlets. So I did that mostly by myself, which was pretty empowering. And there's my partner, Landon, and there's the pile of insulation behind him. So once we got that wiring done in the walls downstairs, we started working on the insulation as much as we could. And we couldn't do upstairs yet because we were waiting for somebody to come and help me with the lights, because I was doing LED lights. You can see in this picture we started doing the downstairs insulation and putting the vapor barrier on there, which is essentially just plastic. And then we got some of the lights in up there. You can see the wires hanging down. There's some of the wiring done. Yeah, and I think that the wiring is what held me back the most in the tiny house, because it was really hard to get the 12-volt system integrated in, and the electrician that I was using in the beginning didn't fully understand 12-volt wiring, but was very good at 120-volt wiring. And I had these dimmer switches that I wanted to wire in, and just so that I had like really good lighting and I could dim it down at nighttime if I wanted to. And so we had to wire in, we had to do some special wiring for that, and it was really confusing. And this problem ended up holding me back for probably 2 months, just trying to figure that out. And I finally ended up figuring it out myself and fixing it all myself, and it was really empowering to do that. And now I feel like I really understand electricity and wiring more so than I ever imagined I would. So that's pretty exciting. So there you can see we finished all of that wiring finally, and we got those holes drilled and started putting the siding up in the loft. And this part was super exciting because I was like, wow, like laying on my floor being like, I'm going to sleep in here someday. And it was just one of the most exciting parts for me. There my loft is all done in with the siding, the pine siding. Oh, and also this pine siding, my partner's grandfather had this lumber sitting up on a piece of property, drying for about 5 years, and he mills wood every so often and has it kind of compiled for himself for different uses, and this was like the perfect use for him that he was thinking of, so he donated this to me as well. And so this saved me a lot of money. This saved me probably a couple $1,000 just having free siding. And since it was drying already for a couple of years, it's not going to shrink too much. It might shrink a little bit, but so far I haven't seen any shrinkage, and it's been holding up really nice, and it smells really nice in the house. And every time people come in, they're like, oh, it smells like pine and natural wood, and I can hardly smell it now that I've been living in the house for a year, but that's what everybody says when they come in, so it's kind of nice. So this is my storage loft. Again, I highly recommend a storage loft. It's very useful. And at this time, I was kind of like living on people's couches and just waiting to get into my tiny house. So I stuffed my things in there like the day that we finished this siding in the loft. So then we started doing the floor, and I don't have a lot of pictures, or I really don't have any pictures of us doing the floor. I just kind of have this like the floor is installed picture because we were just like struggling to do it in one day. We had 2 pieces left at the end of the day before we passed out. It was just one of those times where you're just like working so hard and then you just crash, and there's no time for pictures. It doesn't feel very glorious in the moment, but the next day I was like, yeah, the floor's done. So those things are just, they feel really rewarding. And so here we are doing the ceiling of the storage loft, and we ran out of the pine. So his grandfather had this ash left over, and ash is a really, really hard wood. So I would recommend, if you're doing any kind of wood siding, try and use some softer woods, because this stuff was seriously hard to work with. We ended up having to go buy like a special hole saw just to get those holes drilled through the wood, because this stuff is like what they make baseball bats out of. It's such dense wood, but it really matches the pine and it looks nice on the ceiling. And then we started wiring the lights once we had all the siding done. And we started to put in all of the components for actually hooking up all of the lights and the appliances and everything. So this is my DC panel, and those little yellow things in there are little car fuses. And each one of those terminals goes to a different circuit of lights or an appliance or something like that. And then below that panel is my inverter. And the inverter converts the DC power coming from my battery bank and the solar panels to AC power, so that if I ever want to plug in my computer or something, like if I'm off grid, if my tiny house is parked off grid, then I can still use 120 volts AC power to like charge my computer or charge my phone, turn on like special lights or something like that. So I have that there. And it doesn't power all of the electrical outlets in my house. It only powers one, because if I were to power all of them, then I would have to have a much more beefier inverter, and it would be way more expensive. And I just didn't anticipate that I would need to have all my outlets coming from the solar. So for the most part, I use the solar power, but the rest of my outlets in the house plug into the grid. And so here's that box finally finished on the outside of the house that is building. And you can see where it says Mega Power. Those are my batteries, and I have 3 deep cycle batteries that are they're 12-volt batteries, and they are AGM batteries, which are a special kind of sealed battery that you don't have to water. If you get I can't remember what the other batteries are called, but if they're not AGM, it's this other kind of battery that is a little bit cheaper, and that's usually what people buy. And they actually last longer, and if you maintain them, then they'll last longer than the AGM batteries. But I really wanted to get these sealed AGM batteries to prevent any acid spills, and it just makes it safer. And also so that I didn't have to water them and maintain them, because I was thinking if I ever want to rent this house out, I always said throughout this whole process, like, this is just my first house. It's just my first house that I'm learning with. So I do intend on building a real house someday, and then I'd love to rent out my tiny house. And I don't want the renters to have to deal with like watering the batteries and like worry about messing it up. So I just wanted to get sealed batteries. And then you can see that white box in the back. That's a charge controller, and that takes the power from the solar panels, and it lowers the voltage down to 12 volts and charges it with as many amps that it can. And those batteries are 103 amp hours each, so I have 300 amp hours total of battery capacity. So there's my solar panels all hooked up. It was a really exciting moment. And once I had all of that hooked up, my lights started working too. Oh, right into plumbing. So yeah, once I was done with that electrical stuff, I just started digging right into plumbing to try and get my sink going, and finally have some fresh water in my house. So here is where the water is coming into the bathroom, I believe. Yes, this is the water in the bathroom. And it's just a lot of like valves and trying to keep it organized by labeling the little pipes. I used PEX pipe, which is pretty easy to work with. And you buy these little copper fittings and clamp those black bands on there, which are also copper. There's my water heater on the side, and then you can see on the right that is a spigot and a hot water inlet, and where the hose is coming in is my cold water inlet. Or I'm sorry, that the other one is a hot water outlet. So actually I can have, or no, I'm messing this up, I'm sorry. So the cold water comes into the house where that hose is, and then the hot water can go back into the house in that the inlet on the right as well. So I can pull cold water out of the spigot on the right, on the bottom, and run it through a solar water heater, and then put it into the house in that inlet on the right. It's a lot to think about. But if I'm not doing a solar water heater, I also have that propane water heater. It's a tankless propane water heater. That's what the big white box is, right in the middle. And that works really well. There's been a couple of quirky things that I've had to deal with that thing. This is it on the inside, kind of turn your head to see it, but there's the black gas line going in, and a lot of plumbing and valves to just make sure I can shut the thing off properly if anything goes wrong. But pretty much you just open the faucet and this thing kicks on, and you hear the fan turn on and everything, and then hot water starts flowing pretty instantly as soon as it gets from the hot water, from the heater to the faucet. And it can be a little bit finicky sometimes in the winter, but I highly recommend this model. It's a Girard tankless water heater, and I think it's one of the best things that you can get for like a tiny house when you're cramped on space, because I hear about people who have 5-gallon hot water tanks and their showers are so fast, and then suddenly it's freezing cold in the middle of winter, and they end up changing out those water heaters for this thing. And there's my shower all plumbed in. This was another project that was daunting, like very, very difficult. I bought an RV shower pan. I ordered it from online from an RV distributor, and I used shower board that I bought at Lowe's and bought all the trim pieces and everything, but just getting it all lined up was really difficult. And so I would recommend, if you're ever building a shower like this, to just buy the whole shell that you just pop right in there, because I can imagine it would be a million times easier to not have to like caulk every corner with silicone and make sure nothing leaks. And I've had a little bit of leakage with this shower that I've just had to keep fixing and make sure I like re-caulk it. And in my next house, I will definitely just have something that I pop right in there, make it a lot easier. There's my propane tanks. So I have a 2-stage regulator on here so that when one tank runs out, the other tank, it just starts pulling from the other tank, and it'll flip this little switch and look red. It's like an indicator that will turn red, and then I know that the other tank is empty, and I can pull it out, go get it filled, and bring it back. And then we piped the gas line underneath the house through a black iron pipe, and from there we connected copper pipe to every appliance. So I have a water heater that runs off the propane and a space heater that runs off the propane. And then of course like my stove, my range, my stove and oven. Oh, and this is the heater that I first bought. If any of you are familiar with the tiny house world, this is a popular heater that a lot of people seem to get. It's the Dickinson. The little propane heater. It's about 5,500 BTUs. So I installed this and kind of splurged on it because I thought it was really cute and fancy, and I couldn't find anything else that had a 12-volt fan in it. I needed 12 volts DC. And all the other heaters were for RVs, and they weren't vented. You need to have something that's directly vented, because if you don't, then you're going to have carbon monoxide spewing into your house, which is dangerous, highly toxic, and it'll kill you in your sleep silently. So I was very adamant about having everything directly vented. The only thing I can't have directly vented is obviously my stove, because it's an open flame. But my tankless water heater is vented, and this is vented as well. But it ended up not being hot enough. It was just 5,000 BTUs, and I was turning it on. I installed it right before the winter, and I was still building, so I wasn't living in the house yet, but I could tell right away that it wasn't going to be hot enough. So I ended up tearing this off the wall the next coming fall and selling it, and instead buying an Atwood Everest heater. And it's a vented heater as well. It's directly vented. It's made for RVs, and it's called an Everest heater because the makers literally took it to Mount Everest and used it in an RV. And it's an 18,000 BTU heater. And it has a thermostat and an automatic ignition, as opposed to this one that you have to open that little door manually and light it with a lighter. And when it's really hot, if the flame goes out, that knob is hot, so you have to get like an oven mitt and open it. So to me, it just wasn't worth the price, and there was a lot of inconveniences, and I wanted a thermostat to just keep my house warm while I was gone. So I don't have pictures of me installing the other heater that I ended up using, but you may see it at the end in my final photos. So here's things are starting to come together in the house. I installed my range with the propane and everything, my countertops. On the far right, that's my fridge. It's a mini fridge that I just ordered from Home Depot, and it can run off 120 volts AC or 12 volts DC. So I usually have it plugged into 120 volts so I don't drain the battery. My battery bank and pull power from the solar. And same with my freezer. My freezer is the gray box on the left, and it's a chest style freezer, so that countertop that the flowers are sitting on, that hinges open and kind of snaps onto the wall to stay, and then that freezer can open. And my freezer is bigger than my fridge, but I'm very happy that I have a freezer because I can just stuff all kinds of things in there, and it's just really nice to have a freezer. It's convenient. Having ice in the summertime feels like such a luxury to me. So that is an energy. Oh, what is it called? I can't remember what it's called. But it's a freezer that also runs off 12 volts DC or 120 volts AC, and it's made for like cars. It's made to like be an auto, and it's also made to be highly efficient because it's chest style, and the cold just sinks into it. I wish I could remember the name of it, but they have a couple different sizes, and they're pretty pricey, but I ended up getting one from somebody off Craigslist who was selling it brand new. So those kinds of things would save me a lot of money, like finding things on Craigslist. The stove somebody actually donated to me as well, and it's an old RV range. So it just fit in there perfectly. It fit right over the wheel well, because I framed that wheel well right in there, and it's under the counter so you don't see it. But everything needed to be able to sit on top and be level with the counter. So it all fit pretty good, which was ideal. Here's the other side. I finally got my sinks in there. You can see the bathroom sink in the back. My mom gave me that sink. She just had it sitting like in her garage or something, and she was like, "Oh, I've got the perfect little sink for you," and she mailed it to me from New Jersey. And I installed that little thing, finally had a bathroom sink, and then I've got my kitchen sink. I found that just at at someone's kind of junkyard, bought it for 15 bucks, and it's a really nice big metal sink. And I recommend having a kitchen sink and a bathroom sink. I think that makes a big difference. Some people just have their kitchen sink in their tiny houses, but I really like having both. And I started to build my countertops and everything once the siding was up and I was getting my plumbing done and everything. I started building all this interior furniture, like that little dish shelf and everything. That's really when it started to feel more lived in. And here is, this is a ladder that goes to the storage loft. This was like the thing that was on my brain. I was trying to figure it out. I needed to be able to get to my storage loft and like have some kind of ladder that would fold up there. And I didn't really want a bridge going across from loft to loft because that was my temporary solution. And crawling across there was really annoying. So I constructed this ladder and it folds into two pieces. So right in the middle there, kind of near where you can see that little like piece of hardware on the left side, that snaps into like a gate latch. And so this ladder folds up and like hinges together, and when it unfolds, it meets the ladder that goes to the sleeping loft. And I couldn't use some people are like, well, why don't you just pick up your ladder from your sleeping loft and put it over on the storage loft? But my storage loft was much higher. So that ladder wouldn't even reach, and then the stairs weren't level. You'd be like slipping off the stair steps. So I really had to construct this one to make it work. So it comes in and it meets the other ladder and it makes like a Y. And then I can, so I can go up to my sleeping loft, unfold this storage loft ladder, and then climb up to my storage loft. And then this is some jars that I put on the ceiling. This is like the view of me laying on the floor, like taking this picture up on the ceiling. And I put these little metal brackets on. I got some little angled aluminum pieces at the store and attach them to the ceiling so that these jars can just slide right in. And this is really helpful. It's a lot of storage and it makes a big difference. It took me a long time to figure out how to get that to work, but I love it, and it looks kind of neat with all the colors up there. And then I finally graduated. I finished my thesis. I wrote this 46-page paper about tiny houses and my whole tiny house journey. I finally graduated, and then I got ready to move my house. I was building it at my partner's grandparents' place where there were all the tools I needed, and then it was finally ready for me to tow somewhere and park it. So we towed it away, and this is the day that that I moved in to my new place in Swannanoa. And we had this little porch that somebody gave to me, and my partner Landon, his grandfather, and him built these stairs for the front. And it's set up within an hour, because we basically just put everything on the floor. A lot of people will have cabinets that latch and everything so that when you're going down the road, things won't shift and fall. But we just didn't even bother with that. We just put everything on the floor and packed up the whole house the day before. We drove to the spot that I was going to park in the morning, early in the morning. Took about 30 minutes to drive, and I was so nervous, but it was a really short drive, and we got there perfectly fine. Everything made it perfectly fine, and we set the whole thing up in an hour, and it was just ready to go. It was very odd waking up the next morning in a completely new place, but still being in my house. But I got used to it pretty quick. And over the next couple months, we just started like adding all these things on. We added a clothesline. We put a little garden in the front. We added on an extra porch on the side. And then we built this whole trellis thing. And now the trellis is actually gone, and I have roofing there, so it's covered. So anytime it rains, we still have coverage right there. And it keeps the doors from getting wet and everything. And I put some trash cans. I kind of fitted them to be rain barrels, and it feels like a cute little home. It feels like a cute tiny house, and it doesn't feel like it's mobile, and people don't really realize until I take them to the other side and they see the wheels. And it's really cozy. And this is the inside in the sunlight coming right through on the south side. This is my bathroom. We have a compost toilet. I just built my own compost toilet. It's like bucket style. And we have a place to compost here. And we just do it in these large pallet bins, and it works really well. And another shot of the kitchen. These are the double doors, my cat lounging on the porch in the sun. You can see the sun coming right in through those doors. And I built some screens so that in the summertime we just open those double doors wide open. The airflow is great and it keeps the bugs out. That's a view from my loft looking down. I ended up building that bench on the right much later, but it's really cozy. We've got our shoe shelf and our coats and everything. And underneath that bench is where the heater is. I took these pictures when it was warm out, and I keep that curtain closed. But in the wintertime, I pull that off completely so that it's not like a fire hazard, and the heater is under that bench. And here is my sleeping loft. There's a good amount of room in here. I think that building the floor inside the trailer rather than on top of it really saved me a lot of room for the loft. And so instead of like having to crouch over all the time, we can sit up straight in the loft. Like you can't stand in there, but you can kind of stand and be bent over. I think it makes a big difference. We have about 4 feet of headroom in there. And then on the other side, I built these shelves and put these cubbies in, and that's where we store all of our clothes. And we'll stash like, you know, off-season clothes in the storage loft, but for the most part, we just have to have like small wardrobes and fit it all in those little cubbies. And I think that is it.
Ruby, I've seen this presentation before, you know that, and have just loved it. So I wrote down some questions. Can I start asking?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so from the time you started the project to when you moved in Swannanoa, how many months was that?
It was from when I started the project in Weaverville to when I moved to Swannanoa. I think it was about exactly a year. I think I started right at the end of August, and I moved on August 8th. And then, but really it's just been a continual process, just fixing things, building new things, finding things that once I was living in the house, I really noticed more what I needed to improve on and like where I needed new things. So it's kind of like a never-ending project.
So there's a difference between your material costs and the time that it took to build a house. And this comes up a lot when we talk to people who are wanting to justify the price of a commercial tiny house. Could you talk a little bit about what it cost you to actually build the house, and then maybe how much time it took, which doesn't factor into that?
How much it cost to build the house? It was about $13,000 to build the house for like all the materials and everything. And then what was the other question?
Well, so the $13,000 doesn't include your time.
No.
So it was a year of time in length, but how much actual work time was it? Were you working full time every day for a year?
Okay. Yeah. So in the very beginning, I was still finishing my last semester of school. So I was commuting from school 30 minutes to my build site, and I was basically building part-time. And then once I finished my thesis and everything, I started building full-time in the winter. But I got really held back with the whole electrical system, trying to figure out how to wire in those little switches. And it just held me back a crazy amount. And then also the weather, it was just like, I just remember building that box on the outside of the house, and there was just like a blizzard coming into my face. So it was just stuff like that where I was like, this is crazy. I need to just stop working for today. So I think that like it was kind of full time at that moment. And then once the warm weather kicked in, then it was full time. So it was probably like 6 months of part time while I was still in school, maybe like 3 months of part time in the winter, and then like 3 more months of like hardcore full time. Got to finish this house before I move in the summer, kind of thing.
Okay, so one of the hurdles that a lot of people face is finding a place to
Hmm.
put your tiny house on wheels, plus the zoning and the regulations associated with living in a temporary structure. So,
Hmm.
how did you find your place?
So I actually made a flyer and I posted an ad on Craigslist, and I basically wrote like a long description of me and my partner and exactly what we wanted in the property that we wanted to park on, down to like the location, all the utilities that we needed, and I explained like the tiny house, and I had a picture of it on there and a picture of us. And it was just like this very descriptive ad that I had. And I posted these flyers all over Swannanoa, like at every grocery store, every like little business I could think of where people might see it. And I posted it on Craigslist and all over Facebook. And I got well over 30 offers, and I got them from all over Asheville. I got offers for like right smack in the city, like in like downtown Asheville area. Like people would have a little piece of property or something where they could like tuck us back in there and give us all the utilities. We were very specific that we wanted to be in Swannanoa because Landon had a year left to finish at Warren Wilson. But then I got offers like in West Asheville. I got offers in Canton, Weaverville, and a couple offers out in Swannanoa. And then we found this one, and it just clicked. It was just obvious. I looked for about 2 months, and it just like fit like a glove. It was perfect. And the way that they found us here, the people who I live with here, they were looking on Craigslist for tiny house trailers because they were thinking about building a tiny house and renting it out. And while they were doing that, they were like, oh, look at this couple. This is perfect. They want to be here, exactly where we are, and they already have their house built, so we don't have to build one. And they called us up, and we came and looked at the spot, and it's just beautiful. And we have a garage right here that we get to use like completely. And there were chickens here. There's gardens. And there's a little stream that runs right by the house, so it's like sounds beautiful, and it's just perfect. And I really encourage people who are looking for a place and who are worried about that, build your house first and then worry about finding a place, and be patient and make sure you can just keep your house in some spot for a while you're looking for the right place. And be descriptive about what you need. You know, there's some people who want like full electricity, sewer, and water hookups. For me, I didn't need all of that, and so that makes it a little bit easier, and I can park in more places. But if you're just really specific on what you need, you'll find your spot.
How much experience did you have building before you started? Did you grow up building things?
Yeah, so I didn't have much experience at all. I first went to Savannah College of Art and Design when I first was starting school, and I finished at Warren Wilson College. But when I was at Savannah College of Art and Design, I worked a little bit in the industrial design department, and they had a lot of big machinery, and I was doing a lot of woodworking there, and I built some furniture. So I had an idea of how to work with wood, and that was helpful. But I had never built a home before. I had never worked with plywood at all. I hadn't worked with like power tools from an air compressor, like nail guns and stuff like that. Um, but after a while, for me, it just felt really intuitive. And I feel like I'm an artist and a builder at heart. So it just kind of came to me, and I learned along the way. And it's a major learning process. And anyone who's building a tiny house for the first time and who has no experience, I really encourage them to just take their time, do things right, and let it be a learning process. It's okay to make mistakes. I plumbed my whole shower into the wrong wall and had to tear it out and put it in a new wall. Those things, like, it's okay. You just have to let it happen and learn, and anyone can do it, really.
Do you have insurance on the house?
No, I don't. My house is it's really kind of considered a load on wheels, and I did a lot of research on this. I think that the laws and the rules are changing around this, but for my thesis, I did a lot of research, and it's really a legal gray area where you can't really build a tiny house that's like certified and insured. I actually tried to get some insurance and they were just like, no, this sounds a little bit risky. So there is no insurance on it. So it's like, make sure your house is not going to burn down, because when you lose it, you just lose it. But it really is like a legal gray area where it's not really an RV, but it kind of is. And there's some tiny house companies that are RVIA certified, so they're building like certified RVs. But most other tiny house companies, like, they haven't been able to get that certification. Tumbleweed seems to be one of the top ones that has it. But it makes those houses much more expensive. So anyone who's kind of doing it themselves, I don't think that you can make it RV certified super easy. And there isn't a lot of options for insurance, but it's a growing community, and it's progressing. So, in a couple months, it could be totally different.
Consider yourself a minimalist?
I would say so. I've been basically forced to be minimalist in this house. I've gotten rid of a lot of stuff. If you see that picture of the sleeping loft, we have to share all those cubbies. We can't even have like many clothes, and you can't have a lot of stuff. We have like 2 instruments, and you just can't have things. So yeah, I think that I am a minimalist. I think someday I'll probably have a studio and be able to create things more. But yeah, we use very, very little. Compost toilet, use very small amount of propane, small amount of water, small stuff. Everything's tiny here.
How important to you is the financial freedom that comes with building so much less expensively than a traditional home?
It's really important to me. I think that's one of the main driving reasons why I built my house. My rent is incredibly cheap because it's just paying for this little piece, like this 144 square foot lawn that we're parked on. So it's very, very cheap, and there's so much more we can do. Like, I can survive off a part-time job, and just makes things so much easier. And just, it's a better quality of life. You don't have to worry so much about making ends meet, and it feels very independent. Doing everything myself and knowing that I'm capable of doing it is really powerful.
When you meet people who aren't as independent or have a traditional home and a mortgage and a job, how do they react to your lifestyle?
I think a lot of the people who are kind of living in normal society, not as much like under the table like I am, it seems a lot like they're really excited for me, and they really look up to that I was able to do it, because it feels like such a feat, it looks like so difficult, and people are like, wow, how do you do it, kind of thing. Either that, or like if it's really high-end people living in the suburbs, they just think I'm like a hippie living under a rock kind of thing. So there's like different sides to it. Sometimes I want to tell people I live in a tiny house and we have this great conversation, and sometimes I tell people and they're like, oh. But it's all different, and I think for the most part, it's a lot of people are proud of me, and I'm proud of myself to be able to do this, because it's a big project. It's small, but it really is a big project to take on, especially as a young person.
Ruby, thank you. You just do a terrific job with this. I really appreciate the
Thank you.
the straightforward nature of it, and the good descriptions of every stage. Good luck to you. Thanks for everything.
Thank you so much.